The season of pumpkins, colorful leaves, and cozy blankets is here. Hi creative friends, I'm Jane from Sustain My Craft Habit, and today we have 20 fun and easy fall Dollar Tree DIY ideas to help you craft for autumn.
I picked up 2 of these plastic party bowls from Dollar Tree. They reminded me of a pumpkin, so that's what we're going to make with these. I started by giving both bowls a coat of orange paint. Usually I like to use a chalky paint, but I didn't have an orange one, so instead I tried the Decor acrylic paint that I had on hand, and it did a really good job of covering the plastic and sticking to it. I painted one light coat on both bowls and then dried that completely and painted a second coat where needed. The first coat left a little bit of a streaky finish, which actually looked nice. I contemplated leaving it as it was, but I thought that it would just look more finished if we had it look more opaque. So if you like that little bit of streak to it, you could leave one coat. I don't often use a brown wax for my crafts. I find it intimidating because I feel like I'm going to mess up my project. But in this case, it seemed like a little bit of darker color would help to kind of accentuate the grooves of our pumpkin. So I used a brush and applied a little bit of this brown wax, and then simply used a paper towel to wipe off the excess. I repeated that on the other bowl, and I actually really like how it looked. It just adds a little more dimension to the piece, and it does look like a bit more of these natural ridges and grooves of the pumpkin. And along the lines of accentuating those ridges and grooves, I did add a little bit of this gold luster paint. It's kind of like similar to a rub and buff, I believe, and this one is by Decor. I just used my finger and applied a little bit along each of the ridges of the bowl. And it's really subtle. You can't see it so much in this video, but once you hold it up to the light, and I'll show you at the end, it just added such a beautiful extra touch and highlight to the pumpkin. Next, it was time to dress up the top of our pumpkin. I started by making a double bow with this yellow burlap ribbon that I believe came from Dollar Tree last year, or Dollarama. And you can see here I just pinched and twisted the centers together until I had 4 loops, and then used a little bit of gold wire to hold it all together at the center. We do have a quick how-to tutorial for this over at sustainmycrafthabit.com. Just search for double bow. After trimming the tails of my bows, it was time to put it all together. I started by gluing a piece of driftwood to the top of the bowl, or bottom of the bowl, the top of the pumpkin, to create a stem. I used both a bit of hot glue as well as some Gorilla Glue to affix the wood to the plastic of the bowl. I then glued the bow right beside the stem, added on some colorful faux leaves as well as a beautiful big sunflower, and finally created some tendrils using a little bit of gold wire that I wrapped around a paintbrush and then glued that in place as well. Finally, it was time to put my pumpkin together, and I used a bit of hot glue as well as some Gorilla Glue and lined up all those little ridges to create our Dollar Tree bowl pumpkin. You know what? Only a small percentage of people who watch our videos are subscribed. So if you end up liking this project, we'd appreciate if you hit that subscribe button. For our next Dollar Tree fall DIY, we're going to use a napkin as well as some wood cutouts that I found this season at Dollar Tree. I also had picked up a silver little tray. I don't think it's silver, it's probably stainless steel from the thrift store, and then use that to craft an adorable little sign. So after tracing around the napkin with my water pen, I trimmed it to size to fit in that tray, and then glued in the little cutout that says gratitude and finished it all off with a little raffia bow. I just think this is so cute as a decor piece. I wouldn't use it as a platter anymore, but look how beautiful it is in the kitchen. These gold charger plates make one of our favorite surfaces to create beautiful signs and decor for various seasons.
So one of my favorite techniques is to decoupage a pretty seasonal napkin onto part of the plate and then embellish the rest of it. So we start by removing the extra plies of the napkin, and then I use my water pen, which came from the Dollar Tree a few years ago, to trace around the outside of the design that I want for my sign. And then wherever the napkin is wet, it will tear really nicely and leave a slightly frayed edge that will blend seamlessly with the paint when I paint underneath the surface. If you don't have a water brush, don't worry, just use a paintbrush and dip it into some water to wet it. It works just as well, and then you can easily trace around your designs. Of course, you can use a pair of scissors. It will just leave you a sharper edge, which depends on the look you're going for, might be perfect, but I wanted something that was a little bit more subtle for this. To make sure my napkin stays nice and bright after decoupaging, I like to paint a coat of white underneath. So here I'm using my paintbrush to trace around the napkin where we had trimmed it, and then I will fill this whole part in with my white chalky paint. The chalky paint actually provides a great surface that sticks really well, and we'll decoupage our napkin on top of this. Once the white paint is nice and dry, we'll apply a thin coat of Mod Podge right over top of there and then dry that completely. And next we'll simply place our napkin over top of our painted decoupaged platter and use a piece of parchment and a mini iron to press that right on there. Have you ever tried the iron-on decoupage technique? If so, leave a comment letting us know which surface you've done it on, if it's wood or plastic. We've also done this on glass with leaves, napkins, decoupage paper, so it's really such a versatile and one of our favorite crafting techniques. Once that napkin was decoupaged on there, we applied a little bit of Mod Podge and then sprinkled on some diamond dust to give it a little more sparkle and glam. This craft was clearly beckoning for a bow, so I used this Dollar Tree ribbon to create just a single looped bow for the top of the sign. And then around there I added some of these faux fall leaves, also from Dollar Tree. The orange and reds really coordinated nicely and pulled out some of those harvest colors from the napkin itself. I layered a smaller raffia bow over the original ribbon one and then glued all that together amidst the leaves. Now this part was so fun. I took a little bit of cardboard and peeled off the top layer to reveal that wavy corrugated part of the cardboard. I painted that with some gold metallic paint and then applied that to the sign. Over top, I layered this cute little chalkboard that also came from the Dollar Tree a couple of years ago. And it's really fun. You can change up the messages. I just wrote harvest on there with some chalk. Our new Dollar Tree fall harvest sign was almost done, except that I felt the border around that little chalkboard was too bright, so I mixed up a little bit of brown paint with water to create a faux stain and then stained the wood around that little chalkboard.
I know that we can go higher if we keep our faith, if we keep our faith. Sometimes I'm like a whisper in a riot, but I grow stronger.
If you spot these simple wood shapes at the Dollar Tree, be sure to grab them for this adorable fall craft idea. I first painted the ghost shape white. This will be the beard of the gnome, the pumpkin orange for the body, and then a teal blue hat, but these could be any color you'd like. Next, we'll dry brush some white paint on there to add some texture. Now simply glue those pieces together, layering the ghost over the pumpkin and then the hat on top. With a simple wood bead for the nose, we've crafted an adorable gnome. I made a couple of these and then took one of these Dollar Tree trays and decoupaged on a fall themed napkin and finally glued them all together. Our new gnome friends make beautiful, budget-friendly Dollar Tree autumn decor. For this next craft, we're going to use 2 small wood rounds from Dollar Tree to create adorable risers. You can use these risers to put vases, make small arrangements as we will later in this video.
put planters on there. The sky's the limit. We are going to be decoupaging on a fall themed napkin to make this truly a fall craft, but you can either leave it neutral or make a seasonal riser for any occasion. I'm starting by painting one side of each of the wood rounds with a white chalky paint. Also make sure to paint around the outer edges. The other side you can leave unfinished because we'll actually be gluing the two sides facing each other, so you won't even see that. So set those aside to dry and pull out some wood beads. You can find these also at Dollar Tree, as well as some fine craft wire. You could use a string if you don't have the wire. I just find it easier to thread the beads this way. And we need enough of that to be able to go all the way around the perimeter of the round, because basically we're going to create a border with a string of these wood beads that will peek through from our riser later. It's totally up to you what size of bead you want to use. I think these are about 12 millimeters. Obviously a larger bead would look beautiful as well. It will give you a thicker riser. A smaller bead would look more intricate. So really the sky's the limit for this. We're going to leave these unfinished, but I'll show you a version where I actually painted the beads white after I assembled the entire piece as well. Once we get to the end, you just want to secure that last bead so that it doesn't all unravel on you. And then we're going to glue this string of beads in place around the outer edge of one of the circles. Before doing that though, I'm going to decoupage on this lovely pumpkin themed napkin. It actually came from the Superstore here in Canada, but you could use a pretty Dollar Tree napkin or any other one that you might have that's fall themed. And we're going to simply put on a coat of Mod Podge, let that dry, and then use the heat method to iron the napkin right onto there. It's so quick and easy and gives you such a nice smooth finish for your craft. You'll see me use this iron-on technique quite a bit in this video, as well as other videos and upcycling projects here on Sustain My Craft Habit. It truly is the easiest, less mess way of getting a wrinkle-free result with your decoupage. So once that's pressed on there, I'm simply using a sanding block to trim off the excess of the napkin. You could use some scissors or a little bit of sandpaper. This technique, again, is really effective. You get a nice clean edge really quickly. That's all there really is to decoupaging. You could put on a coat of sealer. I like Duraclear sealer, or you can use the Mod Podge as well. But I did do a dry brush of the white chalky paint over my pumpkins just to give them that little bit more of a distressed effect and tone down the color. They are actually already nice and muted, but this just helped to give it a little bit more of that farmhouse effect I was going for. Now it's time to glue my layers together. So I'm actually making sure that my wood rounds have the painted side out. So this particular round, I ended up painting both sides, but the one opposite to what I'm gluing my wood bead on is actually also painted and finished. It will be the bottom surface of the riser. And so we're just using the hot glue gun and carefully going around, just making sure we have equal spacing and enough beads to cover all the way. Now I'll do another bead of glue around the top of that ring of beads, and then we'll place the top layer, the top round, onto there. This is so fun. You can see how I left the wood beads unfinished. And then really the last step is to add some feet to the bottom to really make it rise up a little bit further. I use just three more beads to add that raised effect. And that's our cute fall themed Dollar Tree riser, all ready to be the center of the show for your fall vignette. I try not to buy too many faux florals, but was kind of blown away when I came across this display at Dollar Tree a couple of months ago. And I went through it and picked out a beautiful bouquet with some deep burgundies, these softer oranges, and some neutrals to use for my fall crafting this year. And so we're going to use some of these elements to create a beautiful floral centerpiece with an upcycled glass jar. I held on to this jar, which was actually a honey jar, because of the really adorable shape. If you can see on the top, it has a lovely honeycomb pattern. So I was thinking that I would actually craft something maybe for Earth Day, or a bee themed craft, but I just couldn't wait and decided to use this to create a cute farmhouse vase for autumn. So after using my heat gun to help pry off that label, it did give me a little bit of struggle, but that's okay because we're going to do a crackle finish on glass for this particular craft. I started by putting on a pretty generous coat of white school glue. I love to use the Elmer's white school glue for my crackling projects, and you'll see some more of them here on our channel. And while that glue was still wet, I applied a pretty generous coat of my white chalky paint over top. The reaction with the wet glue and the chalky paint I've found creates the best crackle effect. If I let the glue dry, it doesn't always work as consistently. You can also use this technique with acrylic paint to get a similar crackle effect. The chalk paint just gives it a nice matte finish. So you can see here as it's drying, I applied a little bit of heat with my tool just to help the drying faster. It creates these lovely crackled lines in the finish. Okay, so the next step was to use this gold luster paint from Decor to rub over that honeycomb pattern to really accentuate the design and have it stand out. The gold is just so pretty with the harvest kind of theme. I love this warm gold for autumn. I added a bit more of the gold luster around that bottom edge of the jar and then wrapped a bit of twine around the neck. Again, we're going for a nice farmhouse effect. So twine, chalky, matte colors, muted colors all seem to go together for that farmhouse style. I used a bit of glue to hold it and then tied a little bow to keep it all in place. Now it was time to fill our vase with some pretty florals. I picked mainly neutrals, but then these pops of deep burgundy to just really fill that out. I put in as many as I needed to create a low arrangement. I made sure to cut those stems pretty low so that it would create more of like a ball effect. I added just a few sprigs of this dark purple eucalyptus, faux eucalyptus. I think it just added to the depth of the arrangement and made it look just perfect for fall against the rest of the neutral backdrop of my vignette.
In a safe place, I got room to breathe. Been a long chase, but at last I'm free.
So I'd argue that this next Dollar Tree DIY might be one of the simplest ones of the whole video. And I basically took a bag of these faux pumpkins that I picked up last year. And while they are really cute as they are, they didn't quite go with the neutral vibe that I had in mind for my farmhouse style centerpiece. So I took some of my white chalky paint and gave them a light coat of paint over the whole thing. I wasn't going for a completely opaque finish. I actually like that some of the orange is still peeking through. So I only did one coat on 3 of these pumpkins. And after drying that paint, I did add a little bit of brown wax to one of the pumpkins just to give it a bit of variation and make them look slightly different. And to finish this off, I simply added a lace bow that I found this ribbon also at the Dollar Tree. So I think this really just helped to elevate our orange pumpkins. I think each of these 3 crafts were super cute, but when you put them all together, they're just extra adorable. I've seen so many cool wreaths and ideas with this pumpkin wreath form from Dollar Tree, so I was determined to try my hand at it. I started by actually tracing around the outside of the pumpkin shape onto a piece of cardboard, a bigger piece of cardboard, and then cut that out to fit. The start of my take on this craft were these dyed and undyed Sola wood flowers that I had purchased, and I'll leave the link to those with a coupon code for you below. But you could also use faux florals instead of the Sola wood flowers to achieve a similar effect. We also used some of this scrapbook paper. It's a little bit thicker than regular copy paper, not quite cardstock, but I had a block of this. I think it was from Dollarama, actually here in Canada. So really you want any decorative paper. You could also use a napkin, like a pretty fall napkin, and decoupage that on here. If I was to be decoupaging a thinner napkin, I would have painted my cardboard white first so that the napkin would have been nice and bright. But because my scrapbook paper is pretty thick, I wasn't worried about that. I simply put on a coat of this decoupage glue. You could use Mod Podge as well, and then placed my paper over top. I needed 2 sheets, so I made sure to line them up so that it looked like a seamless finish. After trimming off the excess paper, it was time to start creating our arrangement. To give our pumpkin wreath a little bit of depth, because this is a 3D frame, so we had to make the most of it, I glued in some floral foam at the different heights, and then on top of that some green moss. I actually collected this from our yard and baked it so that it would be preserved, but you can find green moss at the craft store or at Dollar Tree, and covered that floral foam with the moss. I then added these florals. So these are Sola wood flowers that I had ordered online. They come already dyed as well as unfinished in all sorts of different colors, but you can dye them yourself. We have a tutorial for that over on our website. But if you don't like the look of the Sola flowers or don't have them, you can easily use beautiful seasonal faux florals from Dollar Tree for this as well. To add a little sentiment to our craft, I painted a couple pieces of driftwood white and then hand lettered with a Sharpie pumpkin kisses and harvest wishes on there. I also just added on a little bit of gold foil to give it a little more glamorous and elegant finish. After gluing my little signs in place, it was time to assemble the pumpkin wreath form. I used a combination of hot glue and Gorilla Glue to make sure that the wreath form stayed glued to the cardboard background. I did actually use some clothespins to hold these pieces together until the glue completely set. To finish off our beautiful fall wreath, I don't know, what would you call this? It could be decor, a door hanger, although with the paper background I wouldn't necessarily have it on an outer exposed surface. But just to finish this off, I did wrap some twine around the stem part and added a coordinating fall leaf for the pumpkin.
So I made some plans, some dreams to catch, to promised lands, to find my path, see the planet from great to high.
We used a mini wood pallet, a Dollar Tree napkin, and a little Together cutout to create this quick fall decor item. I started by removing all the extra plies of the napkin and then putting a coat of Mod Podge on the slats of the little pallet sign. After drying that, I placed the napkin over top and then a bit of parchment paper and pressed it all together with my mini press. I used a sanding block to remove the excess napkin from around the outer ridge and those inner grooves of the pallet sign, and then glued on my embellishments, including some pretty faux florals and the Together cutout. This cute little craft was so easy to make and would be perfect as a hostess gift or something to make and sell at a craft fair. I often get questions about ideas for using these cute wood pumpkin shapes and leaf shapes from Dollar Tree. So we picked up one of each, as well as this wood slat. It looks like an apple or a pumpkin shape at the top. I'm not sure which one. I think pumpkin, but you let me know in the comment if you think this is an apple. So I started by mixing up some of that faux stain with a little bit of brown acrylic paint and some water.
This is the burnt umber from Decor, which also I believe is carried at Dollar Tree. So it's a great brown to use as a faux stain because it doesn't have too much yellow undertone. It's more of a cool brown, which gives it a bit more of a modern feel. The raised surface, or kind of 2 layers of this pumpkin and leaf shape, just screamed decoupage to me. So I picked out 2 pretty napkins, both of which came from Dollar Tree, and set to work. I started by painting the pumpkin shape white, and I picked a coordinating color for the ridges of the shape. This pretty blue goes with the pumpkin, the blue pumpkin in the napkin. It's a chalky finish paint called Vintage by Decor, and it just has a really nice shade to it. So I carefully used a fine brush and painted all in the grooves and around that outer border of the pumpkin shape. I then applied a coat of Mod Podge to the raised surface and painted that into a thin coat. While that was drying, I traced out the pumpkins from this napkin using my water pen and then scissors for along the bottom, and then place that onto the pumpkin. This iron-on method is awesome because you can reposition your napkin before pressing it into place, and I had to move mine around a little bit, but I love how this napkin looks like asymmetrical, and we're just kind of using the bottom part of it or covering the bottom part of the pumpkin with it. I used my sanding block and scissors just to help trim out the extra napkin from the grooves and the ridges, and I think it created this really beautiful effect. It's almost like a raised window on the pumpkin to show more pumpkins inside. I repeated this same process using a different napkin and just a warm cream color for the leaf shape. Now it was time to put all the pieces together. I simply glued the leaf shape above the pumpkin shape onto my stained wood panel. I put those little raffia bows that came with it back on, and then added a orange burlap bow. I think this ribbon also came from the Dollar Tree. It was really a beautiful rust colored orange, and embellished it with a button. Finally, to finish it off, I strung together a few wood beads that I dry brushed with the same color of blue as the pumpkin, and then used that on the top for the hanger. This craft makes such a beautiful door hanger. If you are going to put it in an exposed area, you'll want to seal it with some Duraclear or polyacrylic. Whenever I spot these mini clay pots at the Dollar Tree, I always stock up. Ironically, I don't like planting in them because I find they dry out too quickly, but I absolutely love them for crafting. So this is a fun little autumn themed craft I made with a sunflower napkin. I started by painting the bottom half of the jar white, and then the lid, which is actually the base, the catch base, water catch base, with yellow, and it's going to form a little lid for the top. I then applied a coat of Mod Podge over the whole thing and let that dry. And now it was time to add on my napkin. Now the little trick here is that the surface is kind of curved, or it's uneven. It's narrower at the bottom and wider at the top. So to make it look seamless, I actually like to work in little sections and then cut slits vertically to help with kind of overlapping the paper to make it look nice and even. So you can see here I cut 2 slits so that my piece is about 1 inch across, lined up along the bottom edge of the pot. And then I use my parchment paper and iron to press that right on there. And it's going to give us such a nice smooth finish at the end. So see here, I'm just overlapping the napkin from the one side over the other, making sure to line up along the bottom edge, and then cutting another little slit where I think I'll need to do the next overlap. And I continue this all the way around the pot until it's completely covered. Because the Mod Podge underneath is dry, it's easy to reposition and shift my napkin as needed until I get it exactly where I want it to be. And then simply to secure it all together, I'll put on the parchment paper and apply the heat, connect the napkin to the glue underneath. It's a little bit addictive to do this because they're so inexpensive, the little pots, and you can use all sorts of beautiful fall napkins, make a little vignette of them. I like to use them as just decorative items, and we're going to put a little cute lid on the top, but you can fill them with little treats or use them as little trinket holders or jewelry holders, and even gift them for the holidays. At this stage, you're going to have some little flaps where your tissue was overlapping the layers. So you can either trim those off carefully, or I like to just apply another coat of Mod Podge over top, which basically just secures everything together. And it seals it, provides a nice protective finish. To dress up the lid, I actually took one of these little wood mushrooms from the Dollar Tree, painted it brown for the cap, and then added some white spots to use as a little knob on top of my lid. And then just finished it all off with a raffia bow.
Heaven only knows I'm all alone, still lying far from the
I spotted this wood bead pumpkin idea someplace and just had to try it. So I have a selection of 2 different sizes of wood beads. I think the smaller ones came from the Dollar Tree. I'm not sure if the larger ones did, but I know I've bought them on Amazon before. And then I have 3 18 gauge craft wires. They're about 16 inches long that I'm just going to fold in half each of them. Because the wire's pretty thick, you're going to want to have a pair of little pliers on hand. These are little jewelry ones, and just to help you along. Now, when I first made the craft, I used a flimsier wire, and basically my whole pumpkin kind of flopped down. So you do need a pretty sturdy wire here in order to hold your piece together and hold it up. Once I've folded those 3 wire pieces in half, I'm just connecting them along the bottom to create this 6-pointed star shape. Now we can start adding our wood beads. So I like to start with the smaller ones along the bottom of the pumpkin. And so I placed either 3 or 4. It's okay to alternate them a little bit as long as in the end you have roughly the same kind of length of beaded wire. So I put 3 or 4 of the smaller ones and then 1 or 2 of the larger beads to fill up each of the 6 wire arms of my pumpkin. I'm going to keep going until they're all done. I did go back and kind of adjusted, added a few more of the beads where I felt like they were needed. Obviously, the more beads you put on, the larger your pumpkin is going to be. And so I wanted to sort of make the most of the wire that I was using. As I was working along, I'm kind of bending that wire upwards to create a rounded shape. Next, it's time to connect all the top wires together. So I took 2 that were opposite to each other and just twisted them together, trying to keep it nice and tight so that the beads beneath would be really tight, compacted together. Not like so tight, but not all loose. And now I'm just going to add in the other wires, working opposite sections. It's a little bit fiddly, especially since my wire was pretty thick, but just kind of try to gather them and twist them together as best as you can. And once you're done, you'll have this rough pumpkin shape that you can sort of play with to get all those beaded pieces evenly distributed, to make it look more like a nice rounded pumpkin. You know, I think I'd argue that this is the adult version of a fidget toy because you can just keep playing and repositioning this pumpkin to get it looking exactly how you want it, and it does feel really satisfying with all those beads. I trimmed off the excess wire on the top, but just tried to leave a little stem so that I could stick my topper on there. Now I picked up these really cute decorative knobs from Amazon a while back. I've been using them for a bunch of different crafts, and I'll be sure to link them below. But I simply put a little bit of hot glue in there and then stuck my trimmed down wire stem on there. And look how beautiful that looks. We finished off this whole piece with just some greenery to add that little bit of leafy touch to there. And that's our wood bead pumpkin. I think it turned out so cute. I'm going to grab some more wood beads and maybe do a second larger one, even painting my beads as well. I spotted this adorable slatted round at Dollar Tree and picked it up with the idea to make a riser or a little pedestal. So I started by painting the surface with some white chalky paint. You know, this is how I love to start my decoupage projects, and I let that dry. Now, when I was at the Dollar Tree, I did find this pretty ceramic candle holder, which I was planning to use as the pedestal, but of course I left it at my mom's house in the country, so we had to improvise. I had one of these pumpkins left over from the craft that you saw earlier in the video, and so I went ahead and painted that with my white chalky paint and let it dry, and this was going to create the pedestal for our raised platter. Okay, so next we decoupaged on the napkin, which I had found at Dollar Tree, and I loved the selection of different fall napkins this year. I did pick up a whole bunch, but this one just seemed really nice with the pine cones and acorns, and it already had a bit of a shiplap pattern to it, which was perfect for this project. Because this is, you know, a paper napkin, and I plan to put items on top of here to display, I think it's great to seal this just to give it a little extra durability. So I will apply a coat of DuraClear sealer. You could also use the Mod Podge itself and let that dry completely, or something like a polyacrylic, which will give you a little bit of a thicker coat on there. Because our pumpkin is foam, I did sort of smush it after removing the stem part to make sure it would sit flat, and then put a generous amount of glue and positioned my little wood round over that. To finish it off, I just applied a coat of DuraClear sealer to the top, just because it will be something that I'll put items onto and don't want the paper to get wet, damaged, or scratched up. I'm so happy with how this cute and quick little craft turned out, and it's perfect for displaying some pumpkins or other fall themed items. Similar to the slatted round, you can also find it in a square shape at Dollar Tree, and we're going to use this one to make a really cute autumn sign with the Sola wood flowers. Obviously, if you don't have the Sola flowers, you can use the faux florals from Dollar Tree. They had such a beautiful selection this season. Or even dried flowers. We have a video on how to preserve your own flowers using silica powder crystals. And so if you have some zinnias or dahlias, anything like that from the summer, it's actually a great time to harvest a few before they're gone completely and dry them and then use them for crafting. I started by dry brushing the surface with some white acrylic paint. You can see I'm not doing a full coat, but just trying to leave a little bit of the surface from underneath exposed. Little signs like this make great like shelf sitters or something to hang by the front door just as a little autumn greeting, but they're also wonderful hostess gifts with, you know, Thanksgiving coming up, and if you just want to bring something that's a little bit special and doesn't take a long time to put together, this is the perfect type of gift for that. I personally love a little bit unexpected black and white when we mix that with autumn colors. So I found this gingham ribbon on Amazon, I'll be sure to link it below, and use that as the hanger for the piece. I also found the wood grateful pumpkin cutouts on Amazon, but if you have a Cricut machine, you could cut those either out of vinyl or out of cardstock, or if you have a laser machine, you can cut similar design with your laser. I positioned and then glued the pumpkin offset to the top left of the sign, and then filled in the bottom right corner with all these beautiful Sola wood flowers. I started with the larger ones and then added smaller ones almost to create a bit of a crescent shape around the pumpkin.
This craft is so versatile and you can totally customize it for different seasons just by changing out your color scheme and some of the embellishments. We did this version for Halloween as well, which turned out really, really great. You can make so many different things with these wood panels from Dollar Tree. I made a whole bunch of them as favors for a special event for my daughter last year, and wanted to show you how easy it is to make an adorable trinket tray for autumn using the wood panel as well as a few other embellishments. I started by staining the front, sides, and back of the wood panel with the faux wood stain that I showed you in a previous craft. And this is great because once you dry it, if you want it to look a little bit darker, you can apply one more coat to get the finish that you want. Once the stain is completely dry, and you want to make sure that you absolutely let it dry completely, otherwise the yellow might seep through the white surface that we're going to paint next. So I'm just using some white acrylic paint and a paintbrush to carefully paint the inside surface of the panel. Again, you want to let that dry completely, and I would actually recommend letting it even dry overnight so that the paint can cure a bit, because what I found when I tried to apply this transfer that I cut on my Cricut maker, it says grateful, and I used some permanent vinyl. The sticky side, my paint was a little bit too damp and the adhesive didn't want to stick to the paint. So if I had left it to dry better overnight, then it probably would have done a better job, but I did get it off eventually. So after weeding out the vinyl design, I used a little bit of transfer tape that I had fuzzed up with my shirt just to make it a little bit less sticky. And then you can see you use the transfer tape to pull the decal off of the backer and then transfer that onto your surface. It took a little bit of coaxing to make sure that that transfer stayed on that painted surface, as I mentioned before, but we did eventually get it. My mom was here for moral support, sitting with me, because I did this craft during a live, and there's nothing like a craft that just doesn't quite work when you're trying to demonstrate it live. I then applied some of these transfers from the Dollar Tree. They're really cute. They come out during the fall season, and they have pumpkins and different motifs for autumn. Finally, I added some little handles onto my new trinket tray. I'd cut these out of some leftover leather that I had. Actually was reclaimed from a thrift store item, and so I cut this to size and used some gold thumbtacks to fix it into place. I have made these trinket trays also using handles from Amazon that I've ordered, and you can see those here. I had a collection of these terracotta pots from the dollar store in my craft room and thought it'd be fun to turn them into something cute for the fall season. I started by painting both of the pieces with a white acrylic paint. This creates a nice base layer upon which we'll paint the other colors. Once that coat of white paint is dry, we're going to start to paint the candy corn colors. People are very specific about their candy corn colors, so we want to make sure that we paint the narrowest part or the bottom of the clay pot white and then add on a stripe of orange paint. I'm using Decor Americana acrylic paints. I think this color is called Pumpkin. I'll make sure to put the names in the description below, but simply go around and paint about a third of the pot with the white paint and then a third of the pot with this orange paint. If you don't have a steady hand or want to make it more perfect, you could always tape off those sections to make more straight lines, but I really like kind of the handmade appeal of having it a little bit off. Next, you'll want to take a nice bright yellow paint and paint the rim of the clay pot with this color, and we'll also paint the entire lid of the pot as well with the yellow, which is the top part of the candy corn. Once your first coat is dry, you can decide whether you want to paint a second coat for better coverage. I was happy with mine, so I moved on to the next step, which involved adding a little knob to the top. I just used a wood bead and glued that right on there. This creates a decorative little handle or knob at the top, and then I simply tied a little bit of black and white ribbon to create a small bow. You can use any coordinating color of ribbon that you'd like. And to finish it off, I just tied a little bit of raffia around there as well. And that's it. You've got some cute and easy little candy corn clay pots to fill with any sort of treat that you'd like. Rockets are my favorite, and you can use these to decorate with, to give as a non-traditional gift for Halloween. I think I'll be passing on some of these to my nieces, and then have it later for your tier tray or shelf to display. It really looks so cute with coordinating ribbons. I made a set of 3. And I just think they're really easy, a quick Dollar Tree craft for fall. My sister picked up this melamine cutting board from the thrift store for about $1.25, but there was an original tag on the back from the dollar store. So I know that this was at one point there, and I have seen similar paddle signs at Dollar Tree, so you can find one of them to upcycle into this fall craft idea. After painting on the entire surface with a couple coats of white chalky paint and drying that completely, I cut out part of this Dollar Tree napkin and decoupage that on there to create a border around the outside of the paddle. I had printed this phrase onto white copy paper from my inkjet printer and then cut it down a bit to try the Mod Podge image transfer technique. So for this technique, you put on a generous coat of Mod Podge over the painted surface and make sure your design is flipped, because we're going to put this face down onto our sign. So once we've placed it down there, it's really important to let it dry completely, ideally overnight, and this lets the ink from the printout set into, with the Mod Podge, your working surface. While my Mod Podge was drying, I created a bow with some green ribbon and added that to the top of the sign. And then I had all these beautiful dried florals that my mom had dried from her garden using silica crystals, and picked a few coordinating ones to add onto the sign. Okay, so now it's time to remove that top coat of paper from the image transfer. So you're going to take a cloth with water and wet it really well, and then scrub away the paper. So you're basically removing back layer of paper that you had printed your design onto. This may take a couple tries drying your paper between and then re-wetting it again. Unlike laser printer, the inkjet printer doesn't come out as clean in that some of the ink will smear a bit. I just coated it all with a little bit of diamond dust, and I actually was so happy with how it turned out. I think it was really beautiful, and with these dried florals, it was just a really fun upcycling project. My mother-in-law picked up this two-tone wood tray from the thrift store. It was from the Value Village, and I think she paid about $4.99. So I thought that this would be really cute to make into an elevated stand, because she also found a bag of wood knobs that was $2.99, and there's about 2 dozen really cute wood knobs in there. So they would make really the perfect feet for a little stand. I started by painting it with 2 coats of white chalky paint and making sure that the coats dried fully in between. And this was going to make the foundation for some decoupage that I was planning to do. The design of the tray was pretty simple, so I thought it would be fun to add little glue dots all the way around the perimeter to give it a riveted finish. And so it took a little bit of time, but I just went around slowly with my hot glue, pressed it down, and then it made these really sweet little dots. While the glue was setting, I prepped the inner surface of the tray by giving it a coat of Decor Decoupage glue so that it could dry, and then we will be doing an iron-on technique with a pretty fall-themed napkin. I then continued adding those glue dots all the way around. I did it in little sections. I then decided to add almost a driftwood effect to that outer rim of the tray. I used just a bit of black and gray paint and a dry brushing technique to go right around the rim. And this did such a nice job of accenting those little rivets that we created with the glue dots. Took a very little amount of paint and a light touch with my brush. You can see I just dabbed the brush into the paint and then wiped off the excess and then slowly went around over the surfaces, trying to use a light touch. And it really created this nice texture on the rim of the tray. Next, I made sure that the decoupage glue was completely dry in the center of the tray, and then used a little bit of that glue to tear the plies apart on this napkin that I picked up at the Dollar Tree here in Canada. And using just a single ply of the napkin, I placed it on the center of the tray. Once I was happy with the placement of the napkin, I used just a utility knife and carefully went around that little ridge and cut the napkin to size. So this just took a little bit of time, but it worked really well overall to get a nice clean edge. Next, I placed a piece of parchment paper over the tray and then used my little hot iron to press that in place. The heat from the iron helps to fuse the napkin right into that decoupage glue that we put on before and let dry. And this is just such a nice way to get a clean, smooth finish, so quick and easy, way better than all those wrinkles that can happen otherwise. To seal the surface of the tray and keep it from getting stained, I simply applied a layer of this Dura Clear satin varnish, which is really easy to use. It's water cleanup, doesn't smell too much, and provides a nice durable finish. You can get it in different finishes such as matte or glossy. The one I used was a matte. Now it was time to add the feet onto my little tray. So as I mentioned, these, what we think must have been knobs, were picked up from the Value Village as well. There was about 2 dozen in this bag for $2.99, so we'll be crafting a lot with those. And then I picked out 4 of them and painted them white. I just used my brush, which had a little bit of gray on it, and so it ended up creating this really cute texture. To glue the feet onto the bottom of the tray, I used the Gorilla Glue, which provides great permanent adhesion, and then just a little bit of hot glue to hold the knobs in place until the Gorilla Glue has a chance to bond, which takes about 2 hours. And that's it. I'm so happy with how I was able to transform this dated wood tray into a beautiful fall-themed raised platform or raised tray that I can use to put on all sorts of little embellishments or just leave as it is on my dining room table.
These last couple of Dollar Tree fall crafts we have full video tutorials for here on our channel, so I'm just going to give you the highlights. This busted canvas craft is so popular and you can use it to make all sorts of gifts and decor for any season. We simply start by painting the front surface with a beautiful color of paint, something that coordinates with whatever graphic you're going to be displaying in your busted canvas. On the flip side of the canvas, we decoupaged on a coordinating napkin that contrasted with the paint on the other side. Now we're going to bust through the canvas by cutting these slits to create sort of these triangle shapes and then cut that open. Now you're going to press and glue those flaps by opening it up to the front side. So it really does look like this is kind of like an exploding canvas. Now we're next just going to add the graphic onto the back and you get this sort of shadow box effect. You could add lights in here, all sorts of different things. I just added a few embellishments to the top. So this is the basics of creating that busted canvas craft, and as I mentioned, we have the full video that's linked below. Again, we have the full video for this project, a slower version, but just wanted to show you this technique for painting a dollar store wood shape, a pumpkin shape. I know I get intimidated by these sometimes because I'm not quite sure what to do with them. These ones I found last year, and then I just decided to use different shades of orange and yellow to really try to accentuate and make it look like a pumpkin. You kind of follow what you think is the natural curves of where a pumpkin would be, and then do different shading to get that effect. It's actually a lot simpler than it looks. In the end, you get a beautiful, intricate piece that looks like it was professionally painted. I happen to have these chalk couture stencils on hand. This is from last year, and so added this embellishment to the front. And again, I'll link that full length tutorial below, but just wanted to remind you, if you see these wood pumpkin shapes at Dollar Tree, pick one up to craft with and make a beautiful sign or piece of decor for autumn.
Thank you so much for watching. We hope you've loved all these Dollar Tree fall DIY ideas and that they've inspired you to craft something cozy for your home. Let us know in the comments below which one or which ones were your favorites and which ones you might try to make. And if you're not yet subscribed to Sustain My Craft Habit, be sure to do so for more creative DIY, upcycling, and craft ideas. Happy crafting!